Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Kevin Can F Himself. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Once again, I love the whole Lorraine thing, and Kevin's such a dick. This is probably like the most everyone unanimously been like, man, Kevin's kind of a dick. I think the fallout to this show is going to be so fascinating because I think so many people have kind of put up with Kevin's antics because it's usually against other people. But I think it's under the circumstances, now everyone's kind of being like, oh wow, I actually see how much of a dick Kevin is. It's been a slow process. First it was just Allison, then it was Patty. Then we kind of get into that territory. It feels like Neil's going down that direction. Now it's spreading out more and more and more. And I think, especially with Diane, it kind of makes sense because you look back at what Diane said to Allison back in season 1, it's just, she was kind of like projecting a lot of her own stuff onto Allison and saying like, oh, you should do this. You kind of, a good man like Kevin. It's like, now she recognizes Kevin for the dick he is because she sees so much of probably Chuck and Kevin that they're so similar that it makes her go like, I hate Chuck, so I hate Kevin too. It's that thing of just everyone's eyes are being open, and I think that's such a beautiful through line, which we'll kind of dive into that more and more as we break things down. But first and foremost, the whole Lorraine thing, I love the laughing, and that Kevin's such a dick. He basically didn't hide it, but basically she couldn't find her hearing aid because it wasn't where she had left it, because it went from the cup Allison drank out of to the cup that Kevin was drinking out of, and you're just like, just him being like, oh, it's waxy, you're just like, I could taste it for whatever reason, and it makes me like want to gag. It's like you like hearing someone describe it, you can almost feel like you can taste the earwax. You're like, ugh, makes my skin crawl. But nevertheless, Allison calls in Sam's person. It's like, hey, this is how you get the records. This is how you get the death certificate and stuff like that for Gertrude. Well, that's a contacted person, which she goes to Sam. And I love that exchange because Sam's like, okay, I'm not giving you the money. She's like, what? He's like, the way you said that, like, oh, I'm going to have to find a way to come up with $100. It's like, he's like, because I'm going to give it to you. She's like, no, it's not even like I did that on purpose. It's like, you normally just go out of your way to give it to me anyway, but it's not like I'm asking. He's like, yeah, that's back when I thought we were going to be together. And you're like, yeah, that's kind of sucky to be like, because now it makes it, in hindsight, it turns everything you ever did. It's like, oh, you didn't do it because you like care for her. It's like, you only cared because, you thought you guys want to be together. So it's like, right, you wouldn't have done stuff for her otherwise. That's where you kind of go like, ugh. Obviously he's frustrated and just, it's a complicated situation, but you're still kind of like, it's kind of a dick thing to say. I mean, everyone gets hit with like a swerve ball this episode. Well, Allison had read an article. Who was it that quoted? Oh yeah, one of the police they ran into later on, which we'll talk about that. Talked about the article, like the journalist who interviewed Kevin wrote one about Allison, which I think was kind of BS to do that, especially because like she's the one that was kind of talking about how Allison could have made it, and it's like, like it feels weird to kind of like, it's almost like you're trying to put Allison on this pedestal and then kind of tearing her down. I guess it's more so like, right, she is kind of like someone in this town who had an opportunity to be so much more, but ended up kind of like, I mean, we don't know what the full context of the article is, but the fact is, it includes the fact is like, she kind of quit her junior year. It's like, it almost feels like you were trying to build her up to tear her down. But I guess it's just kind of like more so like, hey, this is a bright star we had in our town. And maybe the argument being like, this town has a way to dim everyone's lights. This was our brightest star and even she got dimmed by this town. I don't know. It seemed like such a dick article to write. And Kevin, obviously being who he is, only cares about the fact is that it's not focusing on him. There's even a picture of Allison back when she was in, and he was like, oh yeah, Allison never finishing anything. Comes as a surprise. It's like, God, you not even realize how much of a condescending, like, it's like, it's always there, but it's just like, in that particular instance, it's like the 1-2 punch. But also, Allison's like, yeah, I'm gonna pretend like I'm listening to you. And he's like, yeah, that's great. It's like, either way. Also, there's the whole situation with Patty, who is moving in with Tammy, because Tammy's like, oh yeah, sorry I've been avoiding you, I want to have a certain conversation. I'm like, are you going to bring up the tape? Are you going to bring up the footage? And she doesn't. She's like, yeah, I really like you, you're the best thing that happen in my life, I want to move in. And I was like, I was like, is she actually going to say it? Is she going to bring it up? And it's like, nope, she didn't. But asking her to move it, I was like, this is some BS. We know you got the footage. We know you saw it. You literally the end of last episode, you turned to Patty after seeing it. So I'm like, which now you're like, oh, this is some BS. You're telling Patty to move in so you can have her closer to you so it's easier to keep an eye on her without being suspicious. Because it's like if you live in together, you could spy on her and look through her stuff without hesitation. So it's like, that's super messed up. And Patty's like completely unaware of like, that's what it, and even, because I feel like she also said that because she knew how Patty would react. I mean, Patty literally twice in this episode because of it all ends up having like a panic attack because of it. It's like she's probably never been in a situation where like because her and Kurt didn't live together. They were just like dating. They both had their own places. So it's like this is probably the first time she's been in a committed relationship where someone wants to move in with her. And it's like I'm sure like Patty has her own like baggage and stuff like it's a lot of internal little stuff. And so for someone to be like, yeah, I love you and I want to move in, I think there probably is some truth to what Tammy said, because I did love that Patty's like, wait a minute, the fact is that you don't want to talk, like, oh, you're too busy. It's like, you literally texted me when you were in the middle of arresting someone, because she tried to be like spontaneous and just show up at Tammy's place, because I mean, Tammy's kind of all about that spontaneousness, especially like when they were first getting together, so, but it's like, I do believe Tammy does kind of believe that to some extent, but it's overshadowed. Even if that is true, it's overshadowed by the fact that I know you're just trying to keep her close so you can keep an eye on her, which is like some straight up BS. And it's just like, that sucks because, once again, Patty's having a panic attack over it, but ultimately she does decide, she's like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move in with, Tammy, which is kind of sad, especially because it's not with, like, oh, it's not with love in her heart. It's like, as a cop, her instincts as a cop to try and keep you close to find out stuff. That makes me almost wonder when they go to Patty's salon to get the money, and those cops who, I mean, it's a small town, so the cops are all going to know each other, because these are actually cops who are also at Patty's birthday party last episode. But I'm like, the fact is they happen to show up then and there. You don't think Tammy's asking them to keep an eye on, like, maybe they were secretly following Allison and, I mean, more so specifically, following, Patty, but obviously Allison's involved. Like, they're like, oh, maybe we should give, Tammy a call. They're both like, no. And it's like, maybe they're completely unaware. Maybe it is just a unfortunate coincidence. But part of me is like, I don't know. Would Patty bring anyone else in on this until she confirms things on her own? Especially because it's like, right, it is her girlfriend. So her probably clearing this up will probably, because I'm sure will compromise her job a little bit when it's like, right, you're dating a criminal. And we already talked about it last episode about how Bram, her last partner, compromised her, and she said, like, she was talking to Allison about, like, yeah, it's messed up, like how something inside of me was just so willing and okay to do it. So not unless she's trying to do the same thing with, maybe she does love Patty more and is willing to cover stuff up, which would work out for Patty in the long run. But I'm assuming it's more, like I said, the former of trying to get close to her. But it's like, maybe she wants to, I think she's not going to, I don't think, I could see it both ways. Like I said, there's a slim part of my brain like, oh, that the cops running into them the way they did wasn't a coincidence. But then there's a more larger side of me being like, no, it was a coincidence. Tammy probably would keep it to herself because she wants to get answers on her own. Because if the moment it becomes a bigger thing, it's like, oh, cool, your girlfriend's kind of a criminal, and that might like look bad upon her. We'll have to wait and see. I'm so curious to see what that. I was not expecting that. I figured she would just keep avoiding her, but she knew she wouldn't be able to do it forever because Patty's asking questions. So we'll see. But I love that the cops ended up dropping them off, and it's like, oh, why are they still here? And it's like, oh, we're going to our friend's house, and it's like, hey, it's just like no matter what, couldn't get rid of the cops, and waving to him like, hey. And I love that it's I'll include her name in the the actress, like you've seen her and stuff like SNL, what was that Adam Sandler? It's the one he did with Jennifer Aniston. I don't remember what it was now. Like when they were pretending to be their friends that were pretending to be together, I think was the premise behind it. I know she was in that, like, but I think SNL's the thing I best know her from. the actress who was like the city worker, city, and for her, it's like, right, she worked there for so long, and then they just kind of fired her through email. And now it's like, right, the place is kind of run down, but it's like, who cares? I do whatever I can to help screw over City Hall. So I love this. Like, oh, I'm not breaking in there. Like, I'm not going to break into that building. Here's the key. It's a blackout right now. It's the best time for you to break in there, which I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but I want to circle back around to the fact that, I did love that literally everyone converged at Sam's place, because I think Kevin said he tracked her phone, which is like, okay. Kind of also plays into the fact is, much like the Chuck thing of, no matter where Allison goes, Kevin will track her down. But like, the fact is that that doctor who was causing issues for Allison last season, he was being like, oh, should we talk to Kevin about like you talking about, because he's like, oh yeah, you getting hooked on pills or whatever. It's like, he's kind of a nosy douchebag, especially the way he was talking. He's like, oh, I'm glad things worked out between you and Chuck. He's like, yeah, the whole Tanya thing was unfortunate. And then Neil was like, yo, like, move on and shut up. And he saw Neil, he's like, oh, okay. And it's like, man, he's like, that guy's been my doctor since I was in second grade or something like that. And I've always known I didn't realize how much of, I think he said even then I realized the guy was a dick. But like the whole like Denise being like I said Denise, Diane was like, oh, like, hey, here's I'm using my discount so that you can drink the beer. And it's like, oh, he's like, do you mind if I hang around here? And I was like, oh. I was like, yo, because like that moment they shared in the last episode, I was like, oh, is something going to happen between them? It totally does, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But the fact that there was kind of, I think it's like, right, they're both kind of sad and kind of depressed with their current circumstances, all that he's dealing with, all that she's dealing. They're both in very unhappy positions in their life currently, and they kind of feel, I think, very alone, and they found companionship in that. So I love, like I said, everyone, including Patty, rolls up at Sam's place, and it's like Kevin talking about this whole. I love that line where he was like, "Oh, I never make a mistake," someone who's never made a mistake. And once again, Allison going for the jugular, being like, "Kevin, your mom was a nun and your father was a priest. You were a mistake." I was like, "Yo, coming with the spice!" Like I said, I love it so much because it's such a neat juxtaposition. Once again, it's my favorite word. I use that word so much now. It's annoying how much I use that word now. But I love that season 1, she made sarcastic remarks here and there, but it's not even like, oh, like, oh, sitcom, haha, we're jabbing. It's like, no, I hate you, and I'm not going to pretend to be otherwise. So I'm just going to, when I'm taking jabs at you, I'm going to take jabs at you. Even Pete laughed at the joke. I was like, yo, that's going for the jugular though. Holy crap, man. I was like, that's amazing. So they kind of bail, and Sam's like, well, you're going to leave me here with, it's like, yeah, you're kind of stuck here with them. And so Kevin finds out about Sam staying here. It's like, right, we know his marriage is on the rocks. Because he was kind of hoping to leave his wife for Allison. So obviously, sadly, that didn't work out. And he's like, oh, and I love Kevin be like, yeah, I can see this, like, this imprint of your, like, well, like, what was he saying? Like, your body, because he was saying, like, basically he has an awesome body. I can see, like, the frame of your body in, like, this bed. He's like, oh, thanks, yeah. And it's like, okay. And he's like, yeah, sometimes you can't be, he tries to give him marriage advice later, which is like, he's like, yeah, look, ask my wife if you want, about how, it's like, yeah, Sam already knows how much your wife, quote unquote, loves you. The fact is that he's like, yeah, let me give you marriage advice about what you do. He's like, you should be funny, and that's how you really, like, what was it? The whole thing. He's like, right, you can't be you can't have it all. He's like, I'm just kind of the rare example of I have the looks and I'm funny and I'm smart, blah, 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 blah. When, and it's like, right, use things to your advantage. Like, oh, yeah, you're a sensitive person, use that to your advantage. Say, I'm sorry, I'm broken. I think we could work this out. I'm in AA. He's like, I am in AA. He's like, good. I'm like, oh, you're such a dick, Kevin. But then he kind of like starts getting pissed at everyone because they need their the generator he brought in, which he was kind of an idiot and thought like, oh, it needed batteries, not realizing it needed gas. Ends up disappearing, and is like, oh, like someone stole it. Which one of you did it? So he kind of takes everyone in and does some amateur like interviews and stuff like that and trying to interrogate everyone. He's like, oh, guilty person who stole the generator says what? And Neil was like, huh? And it's like, I can't hear what you said is what like Lorraine said or something like that. So it's like, it's not going the way he wants it to. And then lo and behold, who does he point the finger at? No one other than Neil. And he's like, oh, you did this and stuff like that. And it's like, wait, what? And Neil's like, why would you? He's like, oh, like the fact is you've gotten slimmer and you think I wouldn't know it was you. I mean, we also found out earlier, it's like apparently like Kevin cut off his toe or something and threw it in Patty's backyard and just said, que sera. And it's like, oh, did you ever find the toe? And Neil was like, yes. And Patty was kind of shaking her head like, no, apparently it was never found. Or maybe it was found but never reattached. I think they said specifically it was never found, but they might have said never attached. But it's like Neil was upset and Diane went to check on him in the back alley. And what did they do? Start some love making. And then Kevin was so sure. And then because we also got the big reveal, Kevin's the reason why there's a power out because he was messing with the fireworks and he blames it on Neil. He's like, oh, if it wasn't for Neil, they actually been there to help me. You know, it's not my fault. It's Neil's fault. Like, can't you people listen? So he's the reason why the power's out. Then also Sam throws it out there like, wait, you stole Lorraine's hearing it. It's like, wait, you did? It's like, yeah. And then Neil and Diane came back and he's like, Kevin's like, yo, tell them how great I am. And Neil's like, I can't think of anything. I was like, this is such a beautiful moment. I'm like, everyone there has a reason to hate your guts. And I'm like, dude, this is so interesting because once again, everything kind of goes Kevin's way. That was Allison's biggest issue. But now it's like, things are kind of turning sideways for Kevin. And I cannot wait for this to kind of continue because, you know, the power came back on and it's like, oh yeah, the generator was over here. It's like, yeah, it must have rolled this way. Turns out the person who did that was Diane. It's her way to kind of get back at him for hooking him up with Pete. Because Pete was like, because he's like, oh, trying to hook, you were working with Diane. He's like, Pete's like, what? No, Diane hates me. And then like, Diane was like, wait, me and Pete? No, I hate Pete. So it's like, yeah, because of that, she wanted to get him back. So, and he's like, are you going to tell? And Neil's like, no, I'm not. But one kind of go over to Duncan. And she's like, oh, you bring me. Yeah, you can bring me. He's like, no, I wasn't going to bring it to you. I was going to ask if you wanted to go. She's like, oh, yeah, sure. I'm like, because she's like, yeah, Chuck still got that sawed off. So, like, you know, what we did was just, you know, a byproduct of the blackout, like, not more, right? So, yeah, sure. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I mean, Neil is Neil. So, like, if Chuck ever steps to him. So he is big enough and probably like intimidating enough that he could probably scare Chuck off that Chuck wouldn't do anything. So that might not be as much of an issue, but it still probably could be an issue. We'll see. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, never would I thought that Neil's storyline would take the direction it did. But I mean, like considering how season 1 played out, I wasn't sure. I mean, and also like I avoided every trailer like the plague. So I didn't know I don't even know if any of this was covered in a trailer. It doesn't matter. I didn't want to know anything about this season. So like I just taken some developments I wasn't expecting. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But along with all of that, we have Allison and Patty stealing the records. And there was this interesting conversation where they had, and I don't know if this is going to turn into something bigger or not, or whether this is going to be a commentary or something, but it's like, Allison's like, I've never actually been here to the town hall or whatever, and not town hall, but and for her, it's like, this place looks so nice when you compare it to like the rest of the town. And it's like, you know, and I guess Patty has this line of like, oh yeah, like the town isn't like just all bad. Yeah, it had some bad elements to it, but it isn't just all bad. And I wonder if that's going to play a role in Allison's decisions going forward. Either way, they end up looking through the records. Granted, it's a whole hassle, but no matter what things kind of play out, like Allison keeps a very optimistic view on things. Once again, I'm very Patty. I'm very pessimistic. Just being like, oh, like at once, I'd like you just to admit like, oh, things probably aren't going to be great. But she's like, no, you let in that negative thinking. But it's also because Allison needs that. She needs to focus on something good, because for her, it's like the moment I start like being like, oh, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, I won't end up doing it. And she's like, the 15 years you've known me, what have I done? And Patty pauses and she's like, what? She's like, nothing. She's like, and I can't even blame Kevin for it. She's like, that's me. I do it time and time again. I talk myself out of doing everything. And she's so frustrated because this isn't just a new start with the whole Kevin thing. I think it's more so like there's a lot of internal stuff that Allison, it's just like this town, it wasn't just Kevin was like the nail in the coffin, but this town in general, just her life and the people around her, especially like as we kind of got a little bit with her mom, not last episode, but the episode before last, that it kind of really, like, I think the town and it took a lot out of her, and I think Kevin just like ate the last bit of who she was. So, but it's like, yeah, like I can't just blame Kevin on a lot of my issues. It is on me. So I have to kind of take responsibility for that. So I was like, I need this to work out. Luckily they find Gertrude, but then like, as they were leaving, Patty was like, don't say that about yourself. She's like, what? It's like, what you said back there, it's not true. It's like, if you are some idiot who can't like figure it out, me being by your side and following your lead the entire way, what does that make me, you know? So it's kind of like Patty, like, don't kind of beat yourself up too much. Don't talk about yourself that way. Because it's like, yeah, despite everything, I've been right by your side through it all. So it worked out in the end. But hearing about Patty planning to move in with Gertrude, it is a situation where it kind of strikes Allison. Is like, right, you're not going to plan on living here anymore, but knowing like, oh, Patty won't be beside it, because it's like, right, like we're so distanced for so long in the time we've known each other, but over these 2 seasons we've grown so close, and it's just like, right, you've become like almost my better half, and then like for both of them they become each other's. Yeah, there's an asterisk beside it, but I mean like every human comes with their complication and baggage. You know, that's just general relationships. It's kind of like the compromise of learning how to deal with that, not taking all of it on, and you know, just kind of finding that perfect balance. Obviously, they haven't quite found their perfect balance, but still, they are very important to each other, because despite everything, they wouldn't be where they are without the other person. And despite the craziness of it all, I think there's a little bit of fun in the chaos of it all, whether they'd really admit it or not. And the thought for Allison that, right, Patty won't be here, and Patty's like, yeah, but you won't be either. So it is that thing of like, oh, but it's like, at the end of the day, Allison's like, you found someone you're happy with. I'm happy for you. So, but ultimately she meets with Sam later, and Sam's like, God, he's like, I knew Kevin sucked. Holy crap, this Kevin suck a lot. But then he gets very, like, what was the word I was looking? I'm about to say retrospective, to some extent, that he starts going like, wow, like, it made me realize, like, a lot of the advice he was giving me is like, oh, it's terrible and stuff. And he's like, honestly, I'm not that much, I kind of start wondering, I'm not that much better than Kevin. So he's like, I'm sorry, whatever you need, I will help you. And then they kind of kiss, but she's like, I'm sorry. He's like, no, it's okay. And she kind of breaks down a little bit, because it's just like the pressure of everything being like, I think it's right, leaving her life behind regardless of it all. It's a lot harder than she thought it was. She thought like, oh, I tossed this life aside to be nothing, but it's like giving up being Allison. It's just like, because she thought like, oh, I didn't have much of a life. This town wasn't much. Like now it's like you are giving up everything you are. And there's bad with being Allison, but there's some good, like Patty at the very least. Some of the people around you that make it better, despite the complications. Like having Sam in your life is good. You know, Diane, I think things have gotten better between you and Diane. I mean, obviously your biggest issue has always been Kevin. You know, so, and once again, I think everyone else's eyes are starting to open to that as well. But I'm just so excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.